This dirty, scratched-up piece of metal looks like total junk, the kind of coin you'd find covered in grease at the bottom of a cup holder or buried deep in a jar of rusty nails. Most people wouldn't even bother to pick it up off the sidewalk, let alone look at it twice. But if you toss a coin like this into a discard pile, you might be throwing away a life-changing fortune, because one exactly like it just sold at auction for an absolutely staggering amount of money. First coin. That smooth, dull gray coin sitting right there in your hand looks like absolutely nothing special. It is a 1992 10 groszy piece from Poland, a tiny bit of pocket change that most people would ignore or dismiss as a cheap foreign souvenir not even worth the trouble of exchanging. If you found it in an old box of mixed world coins, covered in layers of dark grime and looking like it had been kicked down a gravel road, you would probably think it was completely worthless. But you need to stop right there and look closer, because this exact date holds a massive secret that has coin hunters and collectors completely losing their minds at major auctions. To understand why this ugly little coin is secretly a golden ticket, we have to look at what was happening behind the scenes in Europe during the early 1990s. Poland was going through a massive economic transition, moving away from the old communist system and completely overhauling its entire currency. As part of this sweeping change, the government ordered a massive redesign of their everyday coins, including the 10 groszy denomination. The authorities planned a huge release for these new coins, but behind the closed doors of the mint, a series of strange events and logistical shifts created a ghost coin, a piece of history that technically shouldn't even be out in the wild, yet somehow, a tiny handful of them escaped into circulation. The key to the mystery lies in where these coins were actually made. While most people assume a country mints all its own money, the demand for Poland's new currency was so massive that they had to outsource production to foreign mints to keep up with the schedule. Some batches were struck right at home in Warsaw, while others were contracted out to the Royal Mint in the United Kingdom. Because of these moving parts and different factory setups, subtle variations started to slip through the cracks. In the chaotic rush to prepare millions of coins for the public, a tiny number of 1992 pieces were struck using experimental dyes or leftover materials that were never supposed to see the light of day. For decades, these coins quietly circulated alongside regular, worthless change, getting scratched, bruised, and covered in dirt, completely hiding their true identity from the untrained eye. Next coin. That dull, dark, and utterly unremarkable piece of metal sitting in the palm of your hand might look like a total piece of junk, but you need to freeze right where you are because that little coin holds a secret that could pay off your mortgage. It is a 1996 10 groszy coin from Poland, and if you saw it lying in a dusty bargain bin or mixed into a jar of random foreign change at a garage sale, you would probably skip right over it. It has a dull gray color, it is incredibly lightweight, and the vast majority of them that survive decades of heavy use are covered in deep scratches, grease, and ugly black smudges. But do not let that worn-out exterior fool you, because the 1996 date is widely considered by elite currency hunters to be one of the absolute holy grails of modern European coinage, and finding one in any condition is like striking pure gold. To understand why this specific ugly coin is worth a massive fortune today, we have to look back at the economic reality of the mid-1990s. Poland had just finished a massive currency reform a year prior, and the mints had completely flooded the market with fresh coins to replace the old, hyperinflated banknotes. By the time 1996 rolled around, the banks and local businesses were completely overflowing with pocket change. The government realized they had accidentally ordered way too many coins, so they rapidly slammed the brakes on production. While hundreds of millions of coins were struck in the previous years, the mintage numbers for the 1996 10 groszy plummeted to an incredibly low level. In fact, for a very long time, many experts believed that these coins were only produced in tiny numbers for official collector sets and were never actually released into circulation for regular people to spend. Next coin. That tiny, scratched-up piece of metal looks so incredibly ordinary you would probably pass it 1,000 times without ever giving it a second thought. It is a 2001 10 groszy piece from Poland, and if you happen to find it resting at the very bottom of a dusty old cigar box full of international travel money, you would likely assume it was completely worthless. It is a small, base metal coin that was designed to buy nothing more than a piece of cheap candy or a newspaper in Warsaw 25 years ago. To make matters worse, almost every single one of these coins you will ever encounter in the wild looks absolutely terrible. They are covered in ugly dark spots, they have deep gouges from being rattled around in vending machines, and they are coated in a layer of sticky pocket grime that fills in all the details of the design. But you need to pause right there and grab your magnifying glass, because the year 2001 is a legendary sleeper date that hides an incredible premium. The story behind this coin's extreme value comes down to a massive mathematical miscalculation by the mint authorities at the turn of the millennium. In the late 1990s and the year 2000, the Polish mint went into absolute overdrive, churning out hundreds of millions of small denomination coins to meet the demands of a booming economy. But as the year 2006 approached, the economic growth slowed down unexpectedly, and the central bank suddenly realized that the country was absolutely drowning in minor coins. The vaults were packed to the ceiling with bags of unissued change, so the treasury managers issued an emergency order to slash production numbers across the board for the upcoming year. When the workers went to strike the 2001 10 Groszy, they only ran the high-speed coining presses for a fraction of the time they normally would, resulting in one of the lowest production runs of the entire modern era. Next coin. That worn-out, discolored little coin looks like it has been through an absolute war. It is a 2008 10 Groszy coin from Poland, and if you saw it lying face down in the dirt at a local flea market or mixed into a bucket of random world change, you would probably keep on walking. It is small, it feels incredibly light, and the vast majority of them that manage to survive years of constant handling look completely unappealing. They are covered in heavy surface abrasions, deep gouges from hard drops, and a sticky buildup of black grease that completely fills the tiny gaps in the design. But you need to stop and take a much closer look, because the year 2008 holds a bizarre and fascinating secret that can instantly turn an ugly piece of metal into an incredibly valuable prize. The secret behind this coin's hidden value does not come from a low mintage, but rather from a massive, top-secret logistical shift that happened behind the scenes at the central bank. By the time 2008 rolled around, the global price of metals was absolutely skyrocketing, and the Polish government realized it was costing them significantly more money to manufacture these tiny 10 Groszy pieces than the coins were actually worth on the street. In a desperate bid to save millions of dollars, the Treasury began quietly experimenting with entirely new metal compositions and outsourcing production to different international mints to see who could produce them the cheapest. During this chaotic period of testing and transition, a tiny batch of 2008 coins was accidentally struck using the wrong blanks, or what collectors call a Planchet error. Because these experimental trial pieces look almost identical to the hundreds of millions of regular, zinc-plated copper coins struck that year, the mint workers didn't notice anything unusual. The entire defective batch was packed into heavy canvas bags, loaded onto transport trucks, and shipped out into the general economy. For nearly 2 decades, these rare birds have been circulating quietly through the public hands, getting scratched up, dropped in the mud, and covered in a thick layer of dark oxidation that perfectly disguises their true nature. To the average person, a dirty, scratched-up 2008 coin looks identical to any other piece of pocket change from that era. But to an eagle-eyed collector, that rough exterior is hiding a rare mint mistake that commands an absolute fortune at high-end coin auctions. Next coin. That dull, dark, and completely neglected piece of metal looks like something you'd find rusting away at the bottom of a gutter. It is a 2013 10 Groszy piece from Poland, and if you spotted it mixed into a pile of cheap world coins at a local antique shop, you wouldn't give it a second glance. It is small, lightweight, and almost every single example that has spent over a decade passing through the public hands looks absolutely miserable. They are coated in an ugly, oily black residue, covered in deep scratches from clinking against heavier coins, and the crisp details of the design have been worn flat. But you need to freeze right where you are and grab your reading glasses, because the year 2013 is a legendary modern rarity that hides a massive financial reward. The incredible value of this ugly little coin traces back to a massive, historic turning point at the Mint of Poland. By the year 2013, the cost of the traditional copper-nickel alloy used to make these coins had gone through the roof. The government was losing a fortune just minting everyday change, so they made a radical decision to completely change the metal composition to steel coated in a thin layer of brass. However, during this chaotic transition year, the mint was running two entirely different production lines at the exact same time. In the middle of the confusion, a tiny number of 2013 coins were accidentally struck using the old, discontinued copper-nickel blanks that were left over in the bottom of the supply bins. This created a spectacular transitional error, a coin that looks like a regular piece of modern pocket change but carries the DNA of an entirely different era. Because these coins were dumped straight into regular circulation bags, they went out into the world and did hard time. They spent years being jingled around in pockets, dropped on asphalt, and left in damp basements, causing them to develop a dark, dull patina that completely hides their unique metallic makeup. To the untrained eye, a scratched and dirty 2013 coin looks like a fraction of a cent, but to an elite coin collector, it is a multi-thousand-dollar ghost that shouldn't even exist. Next coin. This dull, deeply discolored piece of metal looks like it has been sitting at the bottom of a greasy commercial vending machine or buried under wet leaves in a backyard for over a decade. It is a 2014 10 Groszy piece from Poland, a tiny bit of foreign currency that feels completely insignificant when you hold it. If you happen to dump out an old jar of mixed international pocket change and this coin rolled across the table, you would likely try to scrub the black spots off it or simply toss it right back into the discard pile. It has a rough, highly circulated look, the edges might feel jagged, and the bright metallic shine it had when it left the factory is completely gone, replaced by a dark, ugly patina that makes it look like absolute garbage. But you need to pause right there and closely examine this coin under a strong light, because the year 2014 represents an absolute goldmine for error hunters due to a radical, historic change that took place at the mint. The immense value behind this specific ugly coin comes down to an incredibly chaotic and messy transition in how Poland manufactured its pocket change. Up until the early part of 2014, all 10 Groszy coins were struck using a standard copper-nickel alloy, which gave them a distinct weight and look. But as the year progressed, the central bank ordered a complete shift to a much cheaper metal composition, forcing the mint to switch over to a steel core coated in a thin layer of brass. Because of this sudden and massive operational overhaul, two entirely different types of metal blanks were sitting in the production facility at the exact same time. In the frantic rush to push out millions of new coins to the public, a major manufacturing mix-up occurred on the factory floor. A small batch of the new 2014 steel dies was mistakenly loaded into a press that was still being fed the older, heavy copper-nickel blanks, creating a spectacular and highly sought-after transitional error. Next coin. That small, dark, and heavily stained piece of metal looks like it has been sitting in a puddle of stagnant water at the bottom of a rusty metal toolbox for over a decade. It is a 2015 10 Groszy piece from Poland, and if you saw it mixed into a generic bag of cheap European coins at a local estate sale, you would likely look right past it. It is incredibly small, it has a dull, lackluster appearance, and the few that manage to survive years of aggressive handling out in the marketplace look completely miserable. They are covered in heavy surface scratches, jagged edge dings, and an ugly, sticky black residue that completely masks the fine details of the design. But you need to freeze right where you are and grab your best pocket magnifier, because the year 2015 hides a spectacular, hidden mint error that has elite coin hunters checking every single stash of foreign change they can find. The incredible story behind this coin's hidden value comes down to an extreme mechanical malfunction that happened deep inside the high-speed stamping presses at the Warsaw Mint. By the time 2015 rolled around, the factory floor was under immense pressure to produce hundreds of millions of minor denomination coins to keep up with the daily demands of commerce. To hit these astronomical production goals, the heavy industrial presses were modified to run at an absolute maximum velocity, hammering out thousands of coins every single minute. But running heavy machinery at such a relentless, breakneck speed comes with a massive risk. During a late-night shift in 2015, the massive steel die that stamps the front side of the coin with the National Eagle emblem suddenly broke free from its heavy locking collar. Instead of staying perfectly secure, the heavy steel die began to wobble and shift loose with every single high-pressure strike. Next coin. This dull, gray, and completely unappealing bit of metal looks like something you'd find jammed into the tracks of a dirty sliding glass door or buried in the lint trap of a commercial laundromat. It is a 2016 10 Groszy coin from Poland, and if it turned up in a mixed bag of loose world change you bought for a few dollars online, you would probably think it was total garbage. It is incredibly small, it feels light as a feather, and nearly every single one that spent a decade bouncing around the global economy looks absolutely dreadful. They are covered in heavy black grease spots, deep pocket scratches, and ugly corrosion from being exposed to moisture. But you need to halt right there and take a closer look, because the year 2016 hides a massive, top-secret production flaw that has specialized error collectors checking every single handful of change they can get their hands on. The story behind this coin's spectacular value comes down to an extreme manufacturing blunder that took place during a massive high-volume production run at the mint. By the time 2016 rolled around, the factory floor was operating 24 hours a day to keep up with the country's economic demands. To save money and speed up production, the mint used a highly automated system where massive steel strips of metal were fed into a high-speed blanking press, which punches out the small round metal discs, called planchets, before they are stamped with a design. But during a frantic production shift, the heavy feeding rollers misaligned, causing the metal strip to shift out of place. Instead of punching out perfect, uniform circles, the heavy cutting dies slammed down directly over holes that had already been cut. This severe mechanical failure created a highly prized and incredibly rare anomaly known to numismatists as a clipped planchet error. The resulting metal discs were missing large, crescent-shaped chunks from their edges, making them look like someone took a bite right out of the coin. Normally, an automated weight sensor or a quality control inspector would instantly flag these deformed blanks and dump them into a melting pot. But because the factory was running at an absolute breakneck pace, a tiny handful of these defective, crescent-shaped blanks slipped through the cracks. They landed directly into the coining presses, where the heavy steel dies slammed into the misshapen metal with hundreds of tons of pressure, creating a heavily distorted, incomplete 10 Groszy piece. Next coin. That dull, badly discolored little coin looks like something that has been stuck inside the dark mechanism of a dirty parking meter for the last 10 years. It is a 2017 10 Groszy piece from Poland, and if you poured out a jar of random international pocket change and saw this one roll across the table, you would probably push it right into the discard pile without a second thought. It is incredibly small, it has a lackluster appearance, and almost every single one that has survived years of heavy handling out in the general economy looks completely unappealing. They are covered in dark grease spots, deep scratches from rattling against heavier coins, and a thick coating of sticky pocket grime that fills in all the fine details of the eagle design. But you need to freeze right where you are and grab a strong magnifying glass, because the year 2017 hides a spectacular, top-secret mint error that has elite coin hunters turning over every stone to find. The incredible story behind this coin's hidden value comes down to an extreme mechanical mismatch that happened deep inside the high-speed automated pressing lines at the Warsaw Mint. By the time 2017 rolled around, the factory floor was operating under relentless pressure to manufacture hundreds of millions of minor denomination coins to keep up with the daily demands of commerce. To save time and streamline the production process, the mint used heavy automated machinery to automatically feed round metal blanks into the coining presses. But during a chaotic late-night shift, a mechanical glitch caused the heavy feeding arm to misalign, failing to push the metal blank perfectly into the center of the stamping chamber. Instead of sitting squarely between the heavy steel dies, the metal blank was left sitting significantly off-center when the massive industrial press slammed down with hundreds of tons of pressure. Next coin. That dull, deeply discolored piece of metal looks like something you would find rotting away under a rubber floor mat in a scrap car. It is a 2018 10 Groszy coin from Poland, and if it turned up in a mixed bucket of world currency at a local estate sale, you wouldn't even value it at a single penny. It is tiny, lightweight, and almost every single example that has spent years circulating through the public hands looks absolutely terrible. They are coated in an oily black residue, covered in deep scratches from clinking against heavy keys, and the fine details of the design have been smoothed down by thousands of dirty fingers. But you need to freeze right where you are and grab your reading glasses, because the year 2018 hides a spectacular, hidden mint error that has elite coin hunters checking every single stash of foreign change they can find. The incredible story behind this coin's hidden value comes down to a major mechanical malfunction that happened deep inside the high-speed automated pressing lines at the Warsaw Mint. By the time 2018 rolled around, the factory floor was operating under relentless pressure to manufacture hundreds of millions of minor denomination coins to keep up with the daily demands of commerce. To hit these astronomical production goals, the heavy industrial presses were modified to run at a breakneck pace, hammering out thousands of coins every single minute. But running heavy machinery at such a relentless velocity comes with a massive risk. During a late-night shift in 2018, a severe mechanical timing glitch caused a finished coin to get stuck inside the striking chamber instead of being ejected into the shipping bin. When the heavy automated feeding arm pushed a fresh, blank metal disc into the machine, it landed directly on top of the coin that was already sitting there. Next coin. That small, heavily tarnished bit of metal looks like a totally generic piece of pocket change you might find trapped under the vending machine at a local gas station. It is a 2019 10 Groszy coin from Poland, and if it showed up inside a bag of random international coins you bought at an estate sale, you would likely toss it straight aside. It is incredibly small, it has a dull white-gray appearance, and the examples that have spent years passing through the economy look completely beaten up. They are covered in black grease spots, heavy pocket scratches, and a thick coating of sticky residue that hides all the fine details of the eagle design. But you need to pause right there and grab your reading glasses, because the year 2019 hides a spectacular, top-secret production flaw that has specialized error collectors frantically searching every stash of foreign change they can find. The story behind this coin's immense value comes down to an extreme manufacturing blunder that took place during a massive, high-volume production run at the mint. By the time 2019 rolled around, the factory floor was operating 24 hours a day to keep up with the country's economic demands, pushing the high-speed coining presses to their absolute physical limits. To strike millions of minor coins rapidly, heavy steel dies are installed into the industrial presses, which slam into the round metal blanks with hundreds of tons of pressure. But running heavy machinery at such a relentless, breakneck velocity comes with a massive structural risk. Under the intense, repetitive stress of punching out thousands of coins every single minute, the heavy steel die used to stamp the front design of the 10 Groszy coin suddenly developed a microscopic fracture. Instead of the machine being stopped for immediate maintenance, the tiny crack went completely unnoticed by the busy operators. With every single high-pressure strike that followed, the immense force caused the structural fracture to expand, splitting wide open across the face of the steel die. As the metal blanks were fed into the compromised press, the immense pressure forced the raw metal to squeeze directly upward into the deep crack of the broken die. This severe mechanical breakdown created a highly prized and incredibly dramatic anomaly known to expert numismatists as a major die crack or die cut error. Next coin. That tiny, grease-covered bit of metal looks like something you'd find rusting at the very bottom of a dirty cup holder or mixed into a bucket of worthless metal scrap. It is a 2020 10 Groszy coin from Poland, and if it showed up inside a giant bag of mixed world travel money, you would likely look right past it without a single thought. It is incredibly small, it has a dull white-gray look, and nearly every example that has been out in the real world looks absolutely terrible. They are coated in sticky pocket grime, covered in heavy black grease spots, and scratched to pieces from clinking against heavy house keys. But you need to freeze right where you are and grab your reading glasses, because the year 2020 holds a spectacular, top-secret production error that has specialized collectors frantically searching every stash of foreign change they can find. The incredible story behind this coin's immense value comes down to a historic global crisis that turned the entire manufacturing world completely upside down. By the time 2020 rolled around, the global pandemic was slamming factories everywhere, forcing the Warsaw Mint to operate under extreme safety restrictions, heavy worker shortages, and massive supply chain disruptions. Despite these unprecedented challenges, the demand for minor pocket change actually surged as people scrambled to use physical cash. To keep up with the frantic economy, the automated coin presses were pushed to their absolute physical limits, running around the clock with minimal supervision. Under the intense, repetitive stress of punching out thousands of coins every single minute, the heavy industrial feeding mechanisms began to suffer severe mechanical timing failures. Next coin. That smooth, dull white-gray coin sitting right there in your hand looks like absolutely nothing special. It is a 2021 10 groszy piece from Poland, and if you saw it resting at the very bottom of a dusty old cigar box full of international travel money, you would likely assume it was completely worthless. It is a small, base metal coin that was designed to buy nothing more than a piece of cheap candy or a newspaper in Warsaw just a few years ago. To make matters worse, almost every single one of these coins you will ever encounter in the wild looks absolutely terrible. They are covered in ugly dark spots, they have deep gouges from being rattled around in heavy metal cash registers, and they are coated in a layer of sticky pocket grime that fills in all the fine details of the eagle design. But you need to pause right there and grab your best pocket magnifier, because the year 2021 is a legendary modern sleeper date that hides an incredible financial reward. The incredible story behind this coin's hidden value comes down to a major mechanical malfunction that happened deep inside the high-speed automated pressing lines at the Warsaw Mint. By the year 2021, the factory floor was operating under relentless pressure to manufacture hundreds of millions of minor denomination coins to keep up with the daily demands of a rapidly changing European economy. To hit these astronomical production goals, the heavy industrial presses were modified to run at a breakneck pace, hammering out thousands of coins every single minute. But running heavy machinery at such a relentless, breakneck velocity comes with a massive structural risk. During a late-night production shift, a severe mechanical failure occurred on the automated line that feeds the heavy steel coin dies into their high-pressure housing. Next coin. That small, dull gray piece of metal sitting in your hand looks like absolutely nothing special. It is a 2022 10 groszy piece from Poland, a tiny bit of pocket change that most people would ignore or dismiss as a cheap foreign souvenir not even worth the trouble of keeping. If you found it in an old box of mixed world coins, covered in layers of dark grime and looking like it had been kicked down a gravel road, you would probably think it was completely worthless. But you need to stop right there and look closer, because this exact date holds a massive secret that has coin hunters and collectors completely losing their minds at major auctions. To understand why this ugly little coin is secretly a golden ticket, we have to look at what was happening behind the scenes at the mint in the year 2022. The world was coming out of a massive industrial slowdown, and manufacturing facilities across Europe were pushing their high-speed coining presses to absolute capacity to catch up on lost time. In the frantic rush to produce millions of everyday coins for public circulation, a major mechanical mishap took place right on the production floor. The heavy industrial presses are designed to strike regular planchets, which are the round metal blanks, with incredibly precise alignments. However, during a high-speed production run, the heavy collar that holds the metal disc firmly in place failed entirely. This critical mechanical breakdown created a highly prized and incredibly valuable anomaly known to expert numismatists as an off-center striking error or a Broadstruck defect. Next coin. This final piece of metal sitting on the table looks so incredibly fresh you might wonder how it could possibly be hiding an elite secret. It is a 2023 10 groszy coin from Poland, a piece of change so incredibly recent that it still floods the pockets of everyday shoppers and business travelers. If you dumped out a travel bag or sorted through a batch of modern world coins, a piece like this might instantly stand out because it lacks the heavy, decades-old black crust of the older years. Instead, it is likely covered in fresh, greasy thumbprints, light hairline scratches from modern cash sorting machines, and localized dull spots from being shoved into metal pockets. The average person looks at a brand new coin from 2023 and completely lets their guard down, assuming that anything valuable must be old, dusty, and historical. But you need to freeze right where you are, because this exact modern date is hiding a spectacular, top-tier industrial blunder that makes it a massive payday for anyone who knows how to spot it. The secret behind this recent coin's incredible value comes down to a major high-pressure mechanical failure that struck the modern automated production lines at the Warsaw Mint. By the time 2023 arrived, the factory floor was operating under relentless commercial pressure, churning out hundreds of millions of minor denomination coins using high-speed, state-of-the-art robotic stamping systems. To maximize efficiency, the modern coining presses run at a breakneck, hyper-accelerated pace, hammering out thousands of coins every single minute under immense industrial tonnage. But operating at such a punishing, relentless velocity puts a massive strain on the heavy steel machinery. During a high-volume production shift in 2023, a catastrophic structural failure struck the heavy automated feeding arm that positions the fresh metal discs inside the main stamping collar. Thanks for watching.